Thanks for coming to the, what is the date today? June 8th? 7th, Public Works City Council special meeting. I'll call that to order, and the first thing on the City Council was approved weed control, but I think we should just leave any of those City Council decisions to a council meeting if they're not absolutely needed. So I would like to just table that until the council meeting. So do we need a motion to do that, or can we just move on to the Public Works?
Is there any rush in getting this contract happening, TJ?
We'd like to get it straight as soon as possible, but 1 week, make or break it.
Thank you.
Also, wants to wait and discuss for weekend.
Okay, so I guess I'll make a motion, move it that way. Is there a second for it?
I'll second.
Okay, any other discussion on it? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All in favor? And I guess the only thing I'd like to comment on that is this is kind of designed for the council to be part of the Public Works meeting, and that I would just as soon not do council business here unless it's absolutely necessary. So in that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Viersma, to the Public Works Commission.
We'll call the meeting to order for the Cross Lake Public Works Commission meeting on June 7th. Our first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from our May 3rd, 2021 meeting.
I'll make a motion.
Motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Second item on the agenda is a road right-of-way application from Leo Varley to vacate an existing 20-foot easement that runs adjacent to his property and also vacate that and then add another 20-foot easement a little further east on the edge of his property. So he would gain 20 feet from the vacation and give up 20 feet on the east edge of his property. Any discussion on that from Park and Rec? Park and Rec, I guess, recommended approval of what was proposed with some conditions. Anybody want to speak to that? Okay.
I'm Cindy Gibbs. You want my address, where I get my mailing address? Do you want my mailing address or where I actually have a property up here? I live at 1410 14th Avenue, Northeast Brainerd. I have been a participant in the property on Whitefish. My parents own the original property that Mr. Varley owns. 1950, they bought the property. I'm here in regards to the vacation of that access. The access has been there for over 60 years that I know of for sure, until now when the stairway was removed sometime earlier this year by Mr. Varley. The stairway was put in there with some permission granted along with some of the back lots. Mr. Martin, Mr. Walquist, and Mr. Freeman, they went, I guess, I don't think they had a council quite as elaborate as this back then, and were allowed to put a stairway down there. They pooled their money and the dock, and that has been used by everybody that is in that back area. Myself, in the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years, I got the property on the back lots, and well, longer than that, but I haven't actually been using it as a regular basis. I am aware that the stairway was taken out because he felt that it was in disarray. What I saw from it was just the bottom part that was in disarray because of the ice damage and stuff like that. It was agreed that the backlot people used it. I know there's probably nothing in a big writing that says that, but in the property with Helgerson's, Ole and Jane, and the other 4 owners that originally had the property where that driveway goes in. That was the agreed that everybody would use that driveway as well as them to access their cabin. That's what we used. I realize it's 20 feet wide. It's probably about 12 feet that we've been using, and it's hard-packed and usable. My opposal to it is the fact that it's used all the time by my neighbors, both sides. I use it. With the proposal of the access, those 20 feet over there, that if anybody, I'm assuming, has all been down there, so you know it's all wooded. I understand in the proposal that he's willing to clear it off, cut down this stuff, give us 36 inches, that's 3 feet, and nothing cleared 30 feet from the top of the bluff. That's going to be back quite a ways, I think. The trees right in that spot are all grown up, broken over. You can't see a sunset if you wanted to. Yeah, maybe twinkling through there. The current access that's there is cleared. It's really cleared now that all the rocks went down it and then got moved away from it. But I understand the concern is the erosion from the stairs. There is no erosion if the stairs is there. There's more erosion that occurred when the rock was dumped down there and the rock was put along the shoreline than there has been in the last 60 years. I know that. So I'm asking that you reconsider even allowing that 20 feet over here on that property, because we already have had this. It's pretty much been in there forever. I know those access are deeded. They've been there forever when the plots were made. I also know that there's some that are 14 or 13 lots down and some other. You guys all voted to allow those to be encroached on when people built buildings on them. You didn't make them move them. You allowed them to be there. You're still allowing them to be there. So I don't see why you can't allow this to be here when people are using them and people are opposed to this, because somebody bought property on the lake and now they want to merge it, move it, and then all the rules change for the use that we were using. So I ask that be considered in doing it, and I guess I know there's other people here that came because it's very important to them. If you would please give them the opportunity to say a few things.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is John Keller, 1400 Sheldon Street, St. Paul, Minnesota. And I own the property, or I'm part owner of the property directly to the east of the property in question here, 11373 Whitefish Avenue. I guess I have a question as to, I heard it called an easement again here. I've been told it's been changed to a right-of-way that would be moved, so he would not own that property. Is that correct? Because all the proposals I've seen.
This is a public
Okay.
right-of-way.
All the documents I've seen call it an easement, which means he would own all the property. It would be an easement. That's different from a right-of-way.
This is a right-of-way.
John, would you address this, please? It's a right-of-way. It's a right-of-way, okay.
Okay, well, the documents all say easement. I was just there. There are new markers that say new boundary of easement, or boundary of new easement, okay? And I'd have to say that being the neighbor, I look out my windows and it's right next to me. The path would be right next to me. And a path that ends 30 feet from the bluff would be literally useless. 3 foot wide, 30 feet from the bluff, trees, nothing to see other than walking a path, and that's it. If I was selfish, I'd say go ahead and do it. Nobody will use it. 5 years from now, I'll come and ask for a vacation for myself. But I'm not going to be selfish. Now, I understand that, Mr. Varley owns the property. He can do anything with it he wants to it. He could clear it, and I could have a view all the way to his place with, nothing to say about it. But I don't want that either. I mean, if I was in his shoes, I'd be asking for the same thing he's asking for. But I'm not, so I have to ask for what's best for my situation. I think it should stay the way it is. Our cabin was built by my grandparents in 1938. I've gone there all of my life, and that easement, or that right-of-way has always been there, and it's always been used. People pull their trucks in and tailgate and have a little barbecue, And I know I've read the resolution that was in the packet, and it says, it's a resolution to approve the vacation. It says it's in the best of the public interest. I don't believe it's in the best of public interest at this point. All righty, thank you.
Did you say that vehicles have driven?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Now, there are times when obviously, they turn around, they have to go onto his property to turn around, but they can back out also. There's a road, it was a roadway. It was originally, the guest cabin that Mr. Varley has was Helgeson and Jacobs, and it was originally their driveway. That's what they used for driveway. There's no driveway to that cabin. That was what they used for driveway.
Mr. Chair, could I make a comment to Mr. Keller about that and a question for John? Is that a legal non-conforming lot, correct?
Correct.
So that could be built on. There could be a cabin built on
Yeah.
without the easement changing,
Yep.
just so you're aware of that.
Yep, I agree. I agree that if it was left as it is, he could sell it and build a lot. In hindsight, it's right next to our lot. We have a 60-foot lot. Should we have purchased it? Would have been a good idea, but we didn't know it was for sale.
Okay, but I just wanted to,
Yeah.
if there was a lot there, that's all.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'd like to ask the First Lady to come back up and ask her a question.
Okay. Cindy?
You talked about a 3-foot wide stairway going down to the lake. Are you talking about what you have existing today?
No, that's what was there. It was there prior to him removing it. But in the proposal is what I read was that they were going to give us 36 inches walking path to walk in.
The people proposing this don't have the authority to do that.
Well, exactly. But I mean, that was in your guys' information in your packet that I read.
Thank you, John.
Just as the park department looked at it, and their recommendation was to send it, to approve the move and send it to the council for their final approval. That was their recommendation. There were conditions that were associated with it. If a path is to be made, it was to be under the supervision of city staff so that it was done properly. It could be no more than 32 or 36 inches wide, and it had to be on the far western edge of the 20-foot easement so that it maximized the distance between the neighbor to the east, who got up and spoke, and through there. Our current land use ordinance says that you can't develop anything, you can't cut trees, you can't do anything within 30 feet of the top of the bluff. So that was put in there also. And so that we don't impact the bluff, just like anywhere else that anybody's developing a lot, you can't do anything within 30 feet of the top of the bluff. And to leave all the vegetation on the bluff because of erosion issues, we don't want it eroding down. That was what the Parks Department put together and was going to bring forward to the council.
Okay, but personally, I'd like to know how they can legally go down that hill without going through the planning commission.
They
paying
can't.
all the fees.
Well, they would need, someone would need to get they got a permit from the DNR to do the riprap.
Yeah.
They followed all the DNR guidance that was needed. I spoke to the DNR and they followed all the DNR guidance that was required to get the rocks down the hill. Now, yes, they removed some vegetation. They probably shouldn't have done that, but it's gone and there's nothing we can do about that now. If it's moved and the new 20-foot is established on the eastern edge of his properties and he gets to consolidate the rest of it together, then we need to make sure we follow the rules that are in the ordinance now.
Which includes going through the planning commission.
Not necessarily. I could issue, if you're going to develop that, it has to go through this body right here, Public Works, and it has to go through Parks because they are the authorities for the city-owned right-of-ways.
Okay, thank you.
I come back up with that? Okay. Okay, so I just heard John say that they're worried about the erosion and cleaning out what's there. Oh my gosh. Please go look at that again. All that rock, that was not all clear, pure sand like that when that stairway was in there. That stairway was put in there in the early, well, we'll say mid-1950s. And it had been put in there, stuff was growing up. Sure, when you walked up, you might cut a little one out in between. I understand that you have new rules, that those accesses are not to be developed. This was long before that, okay? I mean, it was, I know they would have not ever done this so that it was against the rules because they were very conscientious, Mr. Martin, Mr. Walquist, and Mr. Freeman. But to roll that many boulders down that hill is what took all that out. Oh, too bad, sorry, but it's already been done. I guess it's easier to ask forgiveness than it is permission. I talked to 5 people at the DNR. Not one person told me there was a permit for any of that. Not one. I got 2 people that are going to come out and look at it because they don't, by what I explained to them and the pictures that I sent them, they're like, oh my gosh. My second thing that I'd like to bring up to you guys is, I know how Cross Lake, I've been up here my whole life, spent my summers up, are very progressive. You're always promoting things with kids and that kind of thing. That little access, the 20 feet with the stairway as it was before I removed it, kids could go down there and fish. Kids whose parents don't have cars or aren't driving them into town or into the campgrounds to fish. They can use that access. Other people can use that. My grandkids can use that access when we come up. Vacating that and putting it so we can't access that eliminates their ability, and the small little town, the niceness of the community, we lose that. Sure, we can always go down to the core and down to the big piers, which, because I have kids down there that go down there, it's always not a safe place to go. There's people there that are always preying on somebody. And where this access is, hardly anybody knows about it except the people in the vicinity that uses it. And I would like you to think about that. And being that Cross Lake has already spent a ton of money on this, it could have halfway been resolved if we would have been talked to. And I'm up there enough during the week and on weekends. I'm not unapproachable. I can easily be reached. I got property in Brainerd, I got property here, I can be reached easily. Okay.
Hi, I'm Michaela Huseman. I live across the street from the property, 11330 Whitefish Avenue, and I am just here opposing it because I grew up using that lot as a child, my entire childhood, and I am now living in that house again, raising my children, and we are down there every single day. Like, we take walks down there, we just hang out, have picnics on top of the hill there. And yeah, it's just really important to me that we don't lose it. It's been there forever for me, and I don't see why it can't be there for my kids as well. So, thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Good afternoon. I'm Joseph Christensen. I'm an attorney. I'm representing Mr. Varley in this application. Ma'am, did you say your family owned the lot that the Varleys bought?
Not the lot, the whole, where the house was, the original house that they have, the 2 lots, the 60 and 60, 120 feet, where the stone pillars are that they use for the main cabin. That was my parents' property, yes.
Well, my my brother and his wife owned that property for several years in the 80s, and the Varleys bought it in 1993.
Right, they bought it from my parents, the Christensens, as far as I know.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
So I am
so
aware
you're talking that your family was in there over 30 years ago?
Well, since 1950 until they sold it in, what was it, 93, 92, 93, 94, yes.
Okay, well, the
But I'm
Varleys,
still
the Varleys
here.
bought it from
Right.
my brother in 1993.
I understand.
Okay.
But what I'm saying, as far as who owned it when, but they weren't there when that access was actively being maintained by the back lots. You
Okay.
weren't there when they put them in.
Okay.
Yeah, just so you understand that. I do.
Well, and I misunderstood you. I thought you were speaking of the Lot 13, which is the lot between the access and the neighbor to the east. I thought that she was referring to her family owning that, so I wanted to clarify that. Mr. Varley's been there since 1993, so nearly 30 years. He bought the lot between the access and the neighbor to the east in 2017. And as far as Mr. Varley knows, the stairway that's being referred to was on Lot 13. It was not on the right-of-way. And it was used by that owner, the prior owner, who would come in there and camp and use that stairway, but the whole top of the stairway was gone. And as this lady said, you know, she referred to it being there since the 50s, so you can imagine what the condition of that stairway may have been, regardless of whether the ice got it on the bottom. The whole thing would have been very old and likely deteriorated. If that stairway was on Lot 13 and was being used by the properties across the street, then it functioned as a controlled access lot, and that's prohibited by your ordinance. That type of use of Lot 13, at least today under the current ordinance, wouldn't be permitted. And as has been pointed out, Lot 13 is currently a legal non-conforming lot. So the neighbor to the east, and understandably, he's saying, you know, gee, I'd just soon not have this right next to me, but consider whether you'd want a house on a 60-foot lot right next to him. So, and the conditions that were put in place by the Park Commission were to put the trail to the west side of the 20-foot strip to give as big a buffer between the trail and the neighbor to the east as possible. All those conditions that were referred to are from the city, not Mr. Varley. He has agreed to all of them. He's willing to comply with all of them, but they're not of his origin. Those came from the city. So, and as has been referred to, people are referring to the use of the easement. The easement isn't going away. And someone mentioned, well, what about an easement? What about a right-of-way? I would submit to you that it's a technical distinction. It really isn't very different. In fact, it's not different. You can have an easement for right-of-way purposes. And here, they also want the pathway narrow enough so it will not permit motorized traffic on it. And that's didn't come from us, that came from the Park Committee. So this is, I don't know if you've all been out there, this has some elevation. It has sugar sand base through the whole area under the topsoil on top of the bank, as well as down that bank. I likewise have spent my life up here. I have a place on the north shore of Lower Whitefish on the other side of the Trout Channel, further down past Camp Foley. The bank is basically identical to this. If people go up and down that bank, it will erode immediately, and everything on the surface will go. Where the easement is right now, there is landscape mat on the bank to prohibit any erosion for the time being. And Mr. Varley does intend to take care of that area and prohibit erosion if, you know, if the switch is made and he has control of that 20-foot area. He obviously would not want erosion on that either. So it's not eliminating the easement, it's not changing the legal character of the easement, and we'd request that you recommend approval. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you. Any other speakers from the audience? No? Commission have any discussion on this?
I looked through the packet before I came, and I guess initially I was thinking it makes sense, but after hearing the concerns of the neighbors and how it's been used, and you know, the fact that if we end up with a 3-foot wide path that ends 30 feet from the bluff, it's really of no use to anyone other than, you know, the squirrels, and I'm all for green space, but listening to the neighbors, you know, if it was used where, you know, and quite possibly now because of the sugar sand, I don't know if the neighbors are going to be able to go up and down that hill, but there's quite a difference if you're just trying to enjoy the, you know, the sunset or want to see the lake. There's a big difference in what's there now, where you can go down the cleared area and see the lake or the, you know, sunset, whatever you're doing, versus 3-foot path that ends 30 feet from the lake or the bluff that all of a sudden there's just brush and trees in front of you. It's really of no benefit other than for green space at that point. So I guess at this point I'm kind of siding with after hearing, it sounds like all the neighbors are opposed to it, and after hearing how they've used it in the past and how they could continue to use it in its present condition, and I say that without trying to promote going up and down that hill, because I don't want to see the erosion, but at least it gives them, you know, an open space to see the lakes from behind, and I guess that's my feeling.
Okay.
May I ask a question then? How would you control people coming out to the edge of that bluff? How are you going to control them going up and down the bank? Who's going to be there to stop it? And then if that 20-foot area starts sliding, it's going to start eroding the property on either side of it. So you do have a sort of an attractive nuisance, is what I'd call it.
Well, haven't you guys put fences around? I know the detention basin on West Shore Drive, we've got a fence around that because it's an attractive nuisance, and, you know, to put a couple sections of split rail fence, you know, 10, 15 feet back from the edge of the bluff to stop people, you know, it gives them a visual barrier. The city can do that.
So the city would go out and patrol that?
I'm not saying they're going to go out and patrol it. I'm saying, you know, we're not patrolling any of those accesses now, and
right.
We don't know what necessarily is going on at any of them. But if this one is cleared where the people in back can use it to see the lake, and we need a barrier, I would hope the council would agree to the cost of putting in just a couple sections of split rail fence to put a barrier there. It doesn't block the view, but it is a barrier for people to know they're not supposed to be going up and down that sand hill.
Can I have another, if I may?
Sure.
He says, who's going to stop or watch the people going down there? Who was watching when they brought the truckloads of rock down there? And they drove the equipment down that hill. There was no erosion. And the top part is not as soft as what the bottom part is, because there was dirt on top of there. There was no erosion on that hillside when that stairway was there. Nobody went down in the sides or in the dirt or in the weeds when that stairway was there. They used it. And as far as the stairway being 50 years old, really, did I have to explain to you guys that the stairway was maintained? It was maintained over the 50 years. It was taken care of. I'm sorry I didn't acknowledge that, so it was something that I didn't think I had to say. I thought we were all intelligent to figure that out. But who was there watching when the rocks were rolled down that hill? March, whatever it was, March. Oh, maybe it was a little frozen. There still was erosion. There still is erosion. You guys, I will have to dig up pictures if I can to show that access and how it was before. The access, who had the right to take the stairs off? I don't know, because now you're telling us that that was not even a usable access. It was used, it was respected, it was maintained. That's the main thing you guys gotta understand. And the people that use it right now are not sending their 20 family, friends, people from everywhere else down that hill, down those stairs. It was respectively used by the current people, the people that were there. So when he talks about who's gonna maintain that and watch that from people being there, he should have thought of that when he had all the rocks rolled down there. That's caused more erosion than anybody would do from now for the next 5 or 10 years.
Here's the reality, is that we as a group should have thought of all these problems before we changed this ordinance. Now, as I see it, I sympathize with these individuals. I sympathize with this driver. We're caught in the middle. We already approved the Bailey Rector land swap last month. Last year we did one on Manhattan Point Boulevard, a land swap. Same situation. We got 3 more we're looking at now, coming up, or 2 for sure. And we created this problem, and now here's what we end up with.
I'd just like to make one point. The rocks, when they were installed, the contractor protected the hill. They had mats they put down the hill to roll the rocks over, and then they pulled the mats back up. You could tell if they had seriously eroded that hill, you'd be able to see it. The hill is even across. They didn't erode it.
This is coming before the city council. How are you gonna handle it?
Let me jump.
We're gonna make a decision here, but the key is, we already told Bailey Rector that it was okay, then we're gonna sit there. I tell you, this is.
Mick, let me jump in here. Can I jump in here first before you? I had a good part of bringing this vacation of some of these right-of-ways away. I think the criteria of it was the affected neighbors, splitting them, giving the opportunity to both sides to each take half of them. And the real criteria is that it didn't affect the neighborhood. There was no opposition to it. I believe we've looked at that in previous cases real closely, and I don't think that has been part of it in previous cases. When we sent this back and we told them to come back and revisit it, going to the neighbors to the east was a big part of that, to see how it affected them. Now they're coming back and we're learning that it affects them seriously. So that's a consideration that we got to take into it. So, that's all, because, I was a big promoter of and I still think we should get rid of the ones that we can. I don't think they do the city any good. As far as putting a barrier and a fence up on the easement, I think we should promote and improve easements that are usable, that people do use. That's what they were intended for back in 1943 or whatever year it was that they gave those strips to the public in the backlots. The intended was for the people in the backlots to get down to the lake and use them. So to block that now and say that you can go out there and look at the lake, but you can't use it, I think is a mistake that we're making. That's not what the intention was. I think we should develop them to the point so they're not disturbing or damaging the hill, but able to, for what the use was. So I guess in closing, the people to the east was part of sending this back to see how they feel about it. We're hearing how they feel about it. That should be a consideration in, what you're moving forward. And that's a criteria, and I think at each one of them, because they are gonna come up, they are valuable strips. If nobody wants them and it doesn't affect anybody, then we should give them up. If it does, then we gotta consider it very strongly. So.
I was gonna say that I don't recall any opposition to these other swaps that we've done recently. I mean, it was not. Here we have many people. A couple of months ago, we talked had Jason Baca here, and he was the only one that really spoke about it, and he was against it, but I didn't realize there was all these other people. He talked about other people, but there's a lot of people, the way it sounds, that use it.
Well, we did not get any letters until the 24th of May, so we were not made aware of it. So I couldn't be here for your earlier meetings to even give any kind of opinions at that point. So I have tried to track that down, and the only answer I get is the attorney gets to decide who gets the letters and possibly how close you are. So I was not aware of your other meetings in May. I would have been here. I was actually at the property on the day of the meeting and didn't know about it. So I would have been there. But if it would not been for me looking up my tax information and realizing that this had popped up because I was looking at other stuff, I would have not known it. And then seeing Jason's letter there, 3 weeks later, I get this letter. And I know how this works. Usually you get the letter and you guys all made your decisions on this stuff, and then it's too late. And then it's, I'm sorry, you should have been here earlier. How can I be here earlier if we don't get the letters?
Yeah.
I mean, I know he didn't get the letters. I know Don Barry didn't get the letters. And, I mean, the people that use it, that she got her letter the same day I got mine on the 24th. And I have it to show you. It says the 24th. I don't know how it could have been dated the 24th and arrived at the post office box on the 24th of May.
Yeah, it seems that you should get notices like 10 days ahead of a public meeting on something,
Well, we
like
have
10
a public
days.
meeting on the 14th, I believe, but all those other meetings, we should have at least been aware of it,
If I can add something, she's referring to the council meeting, and that's the public notice meeting, or that's the public notice that they're receiving because it is a public hearing. They don't get the notices of these commission meetings. So when I get calls from, they hear it down the pipeline that there's something going on in their neighborhood, that's how they hear that they're at these meetings. If they weren't hearing that, they don't know that we're going to be discussing this at the park meeting or the Public Works Commission meeting. So that's kind of what she's referring to. She was aware of the council meeting of the...
Not the commission meeting.
Right.
Okay.
So I just wanted to clarify that.
I just want to say there's a, comment about people walking down the bank and things like that off the top of the bluff and causing the erosion. I've been coming up here for almost 65 years. I've never seen that. And since the steps have been gone, never seen anybody on the bank at all. They walk to the edge of the bluff, and look out over the lake, watch the boats go by. That's about it. But I've never seen anybody walking down the steps. I don't think there's any reason for a fence or anything like that. Could it happen? Sure, it could happen, but.
Okay. I would kind of question allowing motorized vehicles to use that easement. Doesn't seem right to me.
But it was a roadway at the time, it was a driveway.
Well, yeah, you can drive there, but should you really be allowed to? That's what I'm saying.
If you look on the GIS map, as you go further down, there's other easements like this, or other right-of-ways. The cabins are off to the side, they drive down.
They're using it as a part of the driveway to access their little sheds.
That would be a special use permit.
So is that what we would have to ask for then, is to have a special use permit, or? I mean, there isn't, when he talks about that, the people driving down there and camping, what's it been, 20 years since somebody did that? The reason for the camping was Don Barry was going down there and camping.
You
My
come up
parents-
with the mic if you'd like.
When my parents owned it, Barry's bought the property on the back lot. Don was a teenager. He liked to camp and get away from his parents, so he would put the tent up on there. Well, my parents, his aunt, and his grandma, we were disturbed by that because that's not how that was supposed to be used. So in doing that, my parents were really good friends with Don's parents. That's why they bought that property instead of camping at the campgrounds. Tried to resolve that because it was loud. I mean, how loud and how long can you listen to smoke on the water? Oh my God. And my parents were disturbed by it. His aunt Miller was disturbed as well, and his grandma, Mrs. Fisher. We told them, you gotta stop doing it. Eventually, we had to call the police, and believe it or not, they did come out. We didn't have a phone, we had to go down to Mr. Freeman's house to use the phone. And they advised him. Well, then they wanted, and that's how they obtained that 53.3 foot lot over there, so that they could use that and they could put their tent. I think they did it a couple times after the grandkids got older. There was no wild parties after that, even when they owned the property. And as of right now, last weekend, there was one car and one SUV type thing. They drove straight in and drove straight out. There was almost 38 people that drove or stopped and looked and walked in that property last weekend because we're talking. So it's not just us 5 or 6 people that are using that property. As far as driving in, I don't think anybody would care if they didn't get to drive in. As long as it was improved to get a stairway so that nothing erodes and we can get down to that property, we'd be more than ecstatic with that. Driving, that's just kind of for, I mean, I would like to drive down there in the wintertime so I don't have to drag my stuff down there, but, you know, if it's the rule, it's the rule, you know. I think doing the SUVs, people just kind of will do that because it's a driveway, it's a paved area. I mean, it's not paved, but it's a packed down area. It probably wouldn't be that nice to do that. 36 inches, that's not even for both of you guys or either one of you two to walk side by side on that path. That's not even hardly feasible. I mean, so, well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could just remind you, the request here is not to eliminate this access. It's not to eliminate it. All Mr. Varley wants to do is move it to one side of his property. That's all he's asking. So, you know, if people use it, which, you know, Mr. Varley's telling me he hasn't seen all these people in there using it. People aren't going to be able to drive in there in the winter. There's a plow bank down Whitefish Avenue that one would have to get over. But be that as it may, he's not asking to eliminate the access. He just wants to move it to one side of his property. Otherwise, you've got him on both sides of the access trying to use his property going through. You have the potential for conflicts between the private property owner and the public using the access as well. So it eliminates a non-conforming legal lot, and it just puts it between property owners. So that's what we're asking. Thank you.
Here's the last thing I'm gonna say. What convinced me about this trade is the gentleman right back here, I forget your name, John, is that as a property owner on Trout Lake, if I bought a piece of property and I have neighbors on each side, and if you came up to me and told me, well, they're gonna vacate 20 feet and put in a public access right away next to you, Nick, I'd sit there and say, no, I don't want the public walking on, I want my property to remain the same it is, and that's the convincing, that's what convinced, if he would've never spoke, I would've thought, Mr. Varley, I would've said, go for it, but I will go right up ahead and say I'm opposed to land swap.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask TJ a question. What happened to the steps?
We don't police those right away, so I don't know who took them out. I can't say for sure, so I can't answer that question. I guess that's my answer.
I thought I heard that Mr. Varley had removed them? 'Cause they were
No,
in
the steps weren't on the public access. They were on Lot 13. Mr. Varley bought Lot 13 and removed them. And Lot 13 was functioning as a controlled access lot,
Okay.
is
Well,
what they're
that answers
saying.
my question. That's why everybody's talking about steps and where did they go and why. You answered my question. Thank you. Where that right-of-way runs
Mr.
to.
Varley bought that property in 2017, that lot 13?
That's my memory, I don't have the exact
Okay,
date.
yep, okay.
I can get it for you though.
No,
I mean, it's a matter of public record.
I've got a question. Did you know that that was a right-of-way when you bought it? And now you're taking and saying, well, no, I can't get from one side of my property to the other side without going over the right-of-way. You obviously knew that it was a right-of-way at that time.
Yes, I did know it was a right-of-way at the time I bought it.
Okay, and what was
Yep.
so then what was your remedy for it? Just to
Um,
go ahead
my-
and vacate it later?
My thought was just to have privacy, and not have someone build on that lot.
Okay,
And
well-
then came to my knowledge that there was a process that I could apply for, to vacate the easement, or right-of-way, whatever we want to call it. So I just took that step, and that's what started this all going.
So now you want to take and move that privacy over, so you have the privacy, but the neighbor doesn't.
What I want to do is I want to move the easement over to the edge of my property so that my properties are contiguous without an easement going down the middle of them. That's what I want to do.
But is it going to create a problem for the neighbor? With the,
Well, that's up to him, you know. I think if the easement is moved and the path is put in per the recommendations of Parks, that I think it would have minimal impact, my opinion. Everybody's got theirs, and that's why we're here. Any other questions for me?
Not right now.
Okay, thank you.
Any more discussion, Commission? Like a recommendation, or one more speaker? Okay.
Well, I don't know how many of you guys know who really I am. I'm J.R. Cooper, a Hall of Fame fisherman. And me and Cindy, we devote a lot of time to all branches of veterans, to handicapped kids and everything else. If we, in Minnesota, keep taking away every little spot that we can take a kid fishing, when we try to go out there and promote, I work with Al Linder all the time. If we tried to promote take a kid fishing, I took my grandkids. A couple years ago, I drove for a half a day to find a spot to fish because half of these places that DNR put in, there's no fish there anyway. They do it on purpose. I know that. I've been a long-time fisherman, 54 years of guiding. I know what's going on. Anyway, I hope you guys give this all a lot of thought. And besides boulders, alter. I studied fish biology, so don't get me that I don't know what I'm talking about. Changes what fish do. And where is the most beautiful place besides this end of the lake that everybody wants to fight over now to take a kid fishing? It's got the great beach. It's safe. It doesn't drop off quick. So when you got kids down there in the water, fly fishing, whatever, it's a safe place. Dave here, I heard him say something, putting something back there to make this really work. I mean, I'm even willing to help. I mean, this needs to be done for the future of everybody's grandchildren. Let's think about this really seriously, please. And I am Cindy's husband, 1410 14th Avenue, Northeast, Brainerd, Minnesota. Thank you.
Okay. Ready for a recommendation to the city council, commission?
Make a motion that, we refuse the right of way. I mean, leave it the way it is. Make that recommendation to the city council.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it. I'd ask Gordy if we could add to that, that this recommendation is based on input from the neighbors that are affected by it.
Correct.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Recommendation to the city council.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
May I say one more thing, please? Can I talk to you?
What?
I just would like to just talk to David for a second, please. Can I?
Who's on the city council? These guys and these guys, so I understand.
We're the commission, the council's on the 2 and 2. 3 and 2. They're all, everybody's here. All council members are here.
Okay, thank you, that's great, that's really good. Can I ask a question, or can we be off the record a second, or whatever? How would we go about, should the council agree with what we recommended, to restore that back, so we can have the stairway? When I talked to the DNR, they told us they have no jurisdiction on it.
Yeah, I think it's they'd probably need that special use permit.
Have we talked to? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for all your time, guys. I know it's important for you to have time, but thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is email from John Grotman regarding sewer project update at the treatment plant.
Mr. Chairman, this is for your information where they are at, the engineers and design for the clarifiers and the work that's being taken upon right now. They're gonna have an electrical engineer out here this Thursday to do some review of what's there and to make sure everything ties in with the new equipment, and so things are progressing as far as the treatment plant.
Okay. Next
This is still on the schedule, so that we're gonna draw down one of the clarifiers this fall and start on it.
That's what we're hoping for, that's what we're shooting for.
Okay.
Next item, Phil had an update on the road projects and stormwater quality.
Yes, Commission, I dropped off, I want to talk about CASA 66, sanitary sewer and stormwater. On Ted's desk, or in front of him, is 3 plan sets. These are completed, ready to go out for bid whenever the city's ready to go out. Obviously, the things that will change will be when you do go out, we'll want to update the wage, prevailing wage forms in there to make sure they fit with the times. Right now, we're based on the current decision, and that changes throughout the course of the year. The items that I think the city needs to progress on, because we don't know when you intend to start an excavator and are working, but we need to get the easements with at the stormwater quality pond, so that's with the log church, and that's with the lumber yard. And then with individual residents, if you recall, on the west side between city or the fire department now and Daggett Pine, if we stub sewer up to a person's property line, which is typical, we typically stop at the property line, we'll be about a foot or 2 inside to the west of the trail. So if you can imagine the situation, we stop, and in a year or 2 later, so we stop at the property line, we redo the trail and stuff, and then a year or 2 later, the property owner decides they want to hook in. They'll basically undermine the trail, and they'll have that cost. of restoration. So we'd like to work with those property owners, try and secure an easement temporary to go another 10 feet or 15 feet into their property when we do the project, so that stub is there. So when they hook in, they don't have that restoration cost, just their piping in the yard. So that's an element that needs to happen. And it's better in our estimation to get that kind of sorted out before you decide you're going to pull the trigger and build. Because that one's always a tricky one. You just don't know how property owners are going to react.
Are you going to go before to proceed with this, are you going to go before the city council, or do we have to act on it?
I don't know if you have to act on it. I think this is more informational. You may have some comments about when you want to get going with the project, but those, I'm trying to basically let you know what steps are left. We've done everything we can at this point. The next step is make sure you have your easements in a row. And then also, I think we're going to submit this out to the utility companies again to make sure that we know what their needs are in terms of time. I think one of the comments that stuck in my mind was Crow Wing Power. And wasn't their comment, please tell us you're not doing this year? So it makes me think they have things that they need to do. I want to make sure we know if they need 2 months ahead of time of us digging to get stuff done. And if the city determines, well, we want to go forward with this in 2022, we probably need to get them notified. So this is information.
So Phil, I asked Phil, we've talked in first quarter this year at the council level about having public hearings in the summer months. We're in June. There's been no talk about extending the sewer at the council level. If we're going to have public hearings, the council has to decide. If we don't get rolling on this thing, I'm saying soon, we might as well not get our grant money because it'll be gone. I'm not willing to gamble away $315,000.
The Bowser grant, as it sits today, expires at the end of 2022, December 31, 2022. Now, can you get an extension for your, maybe not, I don't know, but.
So I don't know if we can put this at the council level for the next week's meeting. If we can have that happen, that would be good so that we.
Right.
You know, we've spent money on getting this all ready. Let's just get it going. Let's have the public hearings this summer when all of the residents are here.
So I would add to then what I said. So we gave you a plan. It can go out for bid. Easements should be figured out and make sure we know that those are in a good spot. Give the utility group a heads up. And then before you go, because this is a 429 process, we're beyond the date from our previous improvement hearing, so we'd have to have another improvement hearing, preliminary assessment hearing. You have to do that again before you go forward. So
with what Dave is saying, excuse me, are we looking at this project for next year?
I'm telling you, I think there's some things that you need to get in. You should get on, whether you go next year or the following year. And I think you're bringing up concern about if you don't do it in 2022, you need to ask for an extension on some dollars or you'll lose the Bowser grant.
I guess that's where I'm going with this, because isn't it, the county doesn't have funds till the following year?
Till 2024 on there. Yeah.
Okay, so we either need to get an extension, ask for an extension now so we know that we can get an extension based on we can't do it till the county's ready to do it. And then if they don't grant the extension, then like Dave says, we got to get moving so it's ready to go in 2022 so we don't lose the grant money.
Right. It's a kind of a chicken egg thing, because I know when we asked Melissa earlier, she was like, well, Bowser is reluctant to grant you an extension when we haven't got to, you need an extension. And I think, like you're saying, this process doesn't happen overnight, so we need to know whether there's a chance for the extension, or we could get the extension, because,
So in my past lives, there was orders we received from different companies, and they had penalty clauses.
Mhm.
But you started the project, and the extension to avoid the penalty was usually, can I get another month? Because all of these parts were late or something.
See, and that's my concern, because we haven't even started the project, and we want to ask for an extension, and that'll look kind of, doesn't
And
look
so
right.
it almost seems like we need to shoot for next year.
Well, that's what I think, but
Phil,
we
who
need
has to make the
And then
decision?
do we just front the money, and this is maybe a Mike question, if we were to do this next year, then if the county money isn't ready to reimburse us till 2024, then do we do a short-term or a construction bond for a couple of years and carry it?
What we did earlier with this project, when we were trying to decide when to do it, and the big hang-up on it was how do we do the assessments? Which process do we follow? That's really where a lot of the debate is on this. Are they too much? Are they not enough? Are they fair? Are they not fair? Are the connection charges appropriate? And we had a lot of discussion on connection charges. So at that time, we went to the council and said, look, we have to tell the county that we still want to do this project. And so we sent the county a letter at that time, a year or so ago, saying, hey, we still want to do this. Can you put in your plan that you'll reimburse us in 2024? Because the county's position on these projects is that we have a 5-year plan, and here's the commitment we made to all of us that live in Crow Wing County, that we're going to spend these funds generated from our sales tax on these projects at this time. So they're still committed, my understanding is, to 2024, and if we want to do the project early, then we just hold that, and they'll reimburse us when those funds are available. As far as extending the grant, I have the same information you do with Melissa, and we said, well, can we extend this thing so we don't lose the grant money? And they said, well, you have to have a project first, and we have a plan, but we don't have an approved project. So until that happens, we can't even talk about an extension. So there's a lot of moving parts here. There's first off, if we want to do a project, then we should make a decision to do it and move forward. We do have the ability to do a couple things. We could talk about financing it ourselves, that, county share. Some of that's changed because they had some curb cutouts, and the storm sewer is something to think about with this whole thing too, because the storm sewer was put back in, how long has that been in there, Ted?
1978.
78, and they were looking at saying, well, storm sewers last a long time, but that's a long time ago too. So they were looking at some potential improvements for that. And so maybe 2024 is still the right timing for all the parties involved. So we're really looking at how do we get a project in place and use that to help us get an extension would be, if I were asked today, how I would do it. I don't know that you could be ready for the storm sewer question to be resolved this time next summer.
I have a question for either Phil or
Storm sewer
Mike.
part has actually been discussed and not ratified with the city, but the county has agreed to pay 50% of the stuff that we impact. And then any addition above it, they want to replace all their storm sewer within the project scope because they feel like it is dated. And they'll pay for anything beyond what we impact their costs. So they've actually increased their portion, but not ratified in writing. That's email discussions.
Phil and Mike, what has to happen to make sure this thing keeps moving on forward? What's the next step? City council has to do something, you have to do something, or?
Well, from a purely, I'm not talking process, purely engineering standpoint, we would need easements from those properties that we're seeking use of beyond the right of way. So we need easement.
The city needs to do that with our attorney.
Yes, I would encourage that.
Thanks.
We can help give exhibits and stuff. We can help Ted or Brad do that, but we need to, whenever the project goes, you're gonna need these easements. So I say get on it now. Don't wait until you wanna put the shovel in the ground because it'll be too late. And then there's a process for 429 we have to follow if we're going to assess people, and that has public hearing requirements. And essentially, because this wasn't petitioned, 4 out of 5 council votes saying we're moving forward with this project. And then in a position to bid.
So we need to get on that too.
I think an agreement with the county ratified with whether you're reimbursing and they're paying part back on 2024 or what. So you're in a position to go. when you're ready to go. There's
So what
other
are,
things that need to be done.
what did you set in front of him? The actual plans?
These
or-
are the actual plans and specs that have all the comments from the county and the city in there.
Okay.
This is what we would advertise and give to a contractor to bid on to go.
So the specs
Yep.
are there?
This is
Okay.
what we were
So
retained to
did-
get the city to.
In your specs, did you put in there that you wanted to go, get easements for the, additional?
What our intention is, we don't have in the specs that we're getting easements. That's something that the city needs to get. The contractor assumes that we are getting him access or them access to private property if they have to work on private property.
So shouldn't we be getting the easements now so that the specs would be updated with that information, or you don't need that in the specs?
I don't need to put that in the construction documents, but we need to have that approval before we go digging onto somebody's property. And so with those plans done, that's the next step. That's what we would do. That's, I think, what you did with the original. You went out and negotiated because you had to go beyond the existing right of way.
So for the next council meeting, Phil, could you come with what you need and give us kind of a brief overview of where you're at? And do you have an estimate for what you think the costs are gonna be, or does?
Right, we have that, we can update on that, we can guess at what the county share is based on what the construction dollars that we're seeing. Keep in mind, that can change in a year or two when you
Right.
actually go out, but I can give you a bulleted item of where we're at and where we need to get, what we think the cost is.
I, for one of
I
the
guess my
five.
point is, I just don't, we have the plan together, and the next step, from a getting a contractor would be to bid that. That's a process. But you have other things that need to happen with easements.
So I guess I'm gonna speak, I,
Process.
for one, would like to see this thing move forward next year in 2022. So whatever we have to do that, come to the next meeting.
Well, I
and
think that's a
lay
good
it out for
approach.
us.
You can stage it to be ready to bid it in 2022, and you can still say we're not gonna bid it, but have everything in order to go. I just make that comment.
So I guess I'd ask the other council people, as long as we're here, what their opinion is for the appetite of doing it next year. Are we kind of all on board with that?
Yes.
Yes.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay, so you got 5 of us are on board to do it next year.
So I'll bring
whatever we need
information to the
do-
council that what the steps are, and at least the track will be to try and have it ready to bid in 2022.
Yeah,
whether
and the
you choose
public
to or not.
hearings and whatever we
Yep.
need to do, if you could do that
Yep.
Monday
Set it up
at the
so that
council
we can
meeting.
tell Mike or whoever what they need to do so we can keep it rolling.
Yep.
You'll be giving Brad,
Yep.
orders, you'll be giving the engineer orders. There's many little things that gotta go in there, so.
And the council would have to include whatever amount it is in your budget for next year.
Right.
Pay the city share.
Well, city and county most likely.
But you would be carrying it.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
We're the banker for that, this coming year then for that.
So one last question. I know it's convoluted because of sanitary and storm. Is it just going to be now one big project?
We would have it broken out, but we would expect one contractor to take that and build it.
Right, but
One
would
contract.
would we just finance it as one big project? Okay, all right.
That's
Because
how I
it's
think
kind
we
of
do it.
grown in scope.
You would be the contract holder on it.
Yep.
You would make sure all the performance was met on it. You would pay the bill. Again, if you build this in 2024, the payment might come back quicker. If you build it in 2022, your payment's coming back 2 years later.
Well, you need a joint powers agreement with the county.
Well, that's what I
Spelling out what
think,
they're gonna pay for.
that's what isn't there. There's email verbiage that I've included Ted and Mike on, I think, that what some of the conversations have been about storm sewer and cost share on that, but I think you have to have that
you have
ratified
to have
and
it all
signed by the
spelled out,
city
signed by
council.
the county and
Right,
city.
and I think that would all get formed as well.
Okay.
Could you, when you come back Monday too, could you give us a brief overview of what your plan is for the storm sewer? I think that's changed a little bit.
Sure, yep.
Just kind of bring us up to date
Yeah,
with where
it's
you're at.
just, I'll bring it up, but it's evolved from, as you can imagine, the storm sewer pipe is up here, our sanitary sewer pipe is down here. It's hard to dig this up or put this in without impacting this. The county, to their credit, has said, we recognize that's not brand new storm sewer that you're basically destroying to get to our sanitary. You put back new, we'll pay 50% of that cost for the stuff that you impact. Then as they sit there and think about it, they're like, well, we'd have the stuff where you impacted, it'd be 2021 vintage or 2022 vintage, and the stuff, everything else would be 1978. That doesn't make sense. So then they say, we'll pay for you putting in new storm sewer with your project, 100%. So I look at that as
A win.
a kind of a, it makes sense because that road then is taken care of for 50 plus years now, so.
That just increases the amount we have to loan the county or put.
Well, your bond increases, but their portion increases.
But it doesn't cheapen our project.
No.
Our amount we pay is still gonna be the same.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, it's inflating, it's, I hate to say it, it's, since we did the original feasibility numbers, the cost of construction has increased.
Phil, wouldn't you think this is gonna make it a more appealing project for some of the bigger contractors?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Because we're larger and it's a bigger contract for them to come after. So.
Yeah, I think it's a good contract for a contractor to come after you. It's good building conditions. You have, for the most part, sand. Their only issue will be, I suspect the city will want to push a pretty tight time lane and traffic and tourism. They're always difficult things to balance, so.
Thank you.
Did you talk to the county about traffic control?
Yep.
Okay. They have routes.
There's going to be a formal route that will take West Shore Drive. That's in the plans. You'll have to go West Shore Drive to 16 to route. And then there's going to be probably a local detour where people are going to sneak and they'll know the back roads to get around, and construction we'll put, once we dig the pipe in, we'll build it back to a gravel passable area so that we're not impacting people too bad. But, you know, it'll be dusty for a while, and we'll probably get comments from some people, but that's unavoidable.
When do you see construction starting?
We would probably talk with the city, make sure what time frame you want to do, whether you want to try and get out the gate. Like this year, we had construction starting actually in April, first part of April, which allowed a lot of contracts. Actually, I have a contract with Brainerd that's 2 weeks ahead of schedule. In Crosby, we have another one that MnDOT's doing that's 3 weeks ahead of schedule because they were able to get out the gate in early April. So you're going to weigh what's the most important part of this. If it's a 12-week build, is it better to do that in the first part, latter part of spring, first part of summer, or does it make sense to try and do in August, September, October? And I'd rely on the local flavor of what people thought about that. But we can stage the construction requirements in the spec.
So you have, you'll come with a project timeline?
I can give you an idea of what it would be, knowing that the city can weigh in and give impact and how you want to steer the construction, beginning of the construction season or end of the construction season.
Just remember, council, that the bigger window we give them, the cheaper our project will likely be. The tighter timeline we give them, the more it's going to cost us. Just typically what happens.
So Ted, when do you see the construction occurring? When would you advise?
I would think after the school buses are done here in June. So now, up until this fall is what I anticipate. So we're looking at about a 4-month build time.
So yeah, you could, if you wanted to preface it around school, it's early June to late August.
Would they consider like after July 4th? Or would that 2 or 3 weeks tighten it up too much?
It could tighten it up. It all depends on the contractor, so.
Well, and that's so, right. So part of that, which is a good point, is the project is large. So some of the smaller contractors, where this might be a big bone to chew on, might not come after it. And that's not a bad thing. The other thing too, though, is if you had a lot of concern about downtown impact to your summer, you may trade off paying a little bit more to get a very big contractor with multiple holes in here to bang it out in a shorter period of time. That's all the discussions that you can have. We can build that into that contract, that whatever the contractor bids, it will be our time frame and they have to meet it, barring weather.
You could still bid the project early and say you can't start till a certain
Right. We would want to bid it early. I think that's the other thing I want to say too, is it's my experience that you bid these things in, I'm going to say January, February, early March. January, February preferably. Get the most competitive bids, get the sharpest pencil. Hey,
December is, people get it done before that Christmas time, and
Yeah.
have peace of mind.
And you can still start it later, but we want them to kind of be setting up their season based on, hey, we got this nice big job in Cross Lake. You know, they can charge everyone else a premium, so.
I think we should start right after St. Patty's Day. Get it early.
I agree, David.
What's that?
Early.
Oh, the delayed, not yet. They were just, I think they did them Friday. I drove through Harbor Lane today and looked down Wild Wind Ranch and saw that there was, looked like they had got in there, so. I don't know if they've got them all done, but I haven't gotten them back yet. So that was my update on 66. I understand what you want. You want to know the steps and for assuming a 2022 build. And then just on the delayed 2021 improvements, again, that was an update on, we started the field survey work, we got the soil borings going, the input ID, I have done, they've created it, I haven't made it live. Our intent is to make it live along with the notice that we're going to send out, letting people know that the city is considering these improvements, picking them up again. I would like to propose an information meeting for the delayed 2021 improvements to occur the week of July 19th. I could try and pinpoint a date if you wanted, but I was kind of being vague because I'm not certain that the Public Works or council will be in favor of that. But the idea was to have an information meeting. It might be that no one shows up. It might be that we get a few people there. Nonetheless, we want to make that offer or that extend that opportunity for people to come in. And then I think the improvement hearings would be, I'd like to say the week of August 23rd. So that's kind of then that's let's call the information meeting the opportunity where people come in and give us information, but probably are asking, what's my assessment? But then the one in August is the true assessment improvement hearing where the city listens and says, this is what the assessment is, preliminary, what we think it is, go or don't go. And if you say go, then we would put the plans together with the goal to bid again. Haven't done end of December, bid January, February, build next summer. So, only one other comment. We did start the field surveying last week. I held them off for 3 weeks, waiting to see if there was information coming. I understand that the city did receive, on Friday you received information, so we suspended our field surveyor work until we get that information, which, do you have it? Or? Which if I can get it, we'll take it back and look and see what's usable. So that's my update.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Phil.
Other business?
I have nothing for the council.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make a motion. Second.
Motion second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn the council meeting also.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries, council adjourned.